Good morning, everyone. Today is Wednesday the 27th. Today on WOWT, there's a special broadcast about news events that have occurred over the 15th century. We will take you into more detail about these events. Hello. During this newscast, the main events that we are going to talk about is going to be Henry VIII, the Reformation, the Renaissance, the 30 Years' War, Italian Wars, and the start of the Qing Dynasty. All in all, we will go into very depth about these details. Please stay tuned for more. Henry VIII was King of England from April 21st, 1509 until his death. He was Lord of Ireland and claimed it to the Kingdom of France. Henry was the second monarch of the House of Tudor, succeeding his father Henry VII. Besides his 6 marriages, Henry VIII is known for his role in the separation of the Church of England from the Roman Catholic Church. Henry's struggles with Rome led to the separation of the Church of England from the papal authority, to the dissolution of the monasteries, and establishing himself as the supreme head of the Church of England. He did this and suppressed the monasteries while, however, remaining a believer in more Catholic theological teachings. Even after his excommunication from the Roman Catholic Church, Henry oversaw the legal union of England and Wales with the Laws and Wales Acts of 1535 to 1542. Henry was an attractive and charismatic man in his prime, educated and accomplished. He was an author and a composer. He ruled with absolute power. His desire to prove England with a male heir, which stemmed partly from the personal vanity and partially because he believed the daughter would be able to consolidate the Tudor dynasty, and the fragile peace and the existed fallings of the Wars of the Roses, led to the two things that Henry is remembered for: his wives and the English Reformation, which we are just going to talk about, that made England mostly a Protestant nation. In later life, he became morbidly obese and his health suffered. His public image is frequently depicted as one of the lustful, egotistical, and harsh and insecure king.
The Protestant Reformation, also called the Protestant Revolt or simply the Reformation, was the European Christian reform movement that established Protestantism as a constituent branch of contemporary Christianity. It was led by Martin Luther, John Calvin, and other early Protestants. The efforts of the self-described reformers who objected to the doctrines, rituals, and essential structure of the Catholic Church led to the creation of new national Protestant churches. The Catholics responded with a counter-reformation led by the Jesuit order, which reclaimed large parts of Europe, such as Poland. In general, Northern Europe, with the exception of Ireland and pockets of Britain, turned Protestant, and Southern Europe remained Catholic, while fierce battles that turned into warfare took place in this center. The largest of the new dominations were the Anglicans, based in England, the Lutherans, based in Germany and Scandinavia, and the Reformed churches based in Germany, Switzerland, the Netherlands, and Scotland.
Indeed.
There were many smaller bodies as well. Most common dating begins in 1517, when Luther published the 95 Theses, and concludes in 1648 with the Treaty of Westphalia that ended years of European religious wars. Yes!
The Renaissance is a cultural movement that spanned roughly the 14th to the 17th century, beginning in Florence in the late Middle Ages and later spreading to the rest of Europe. The term is also used more loosely to refer to the historic era, but since the changes of the Renaissance were not uniform across Europe, this is a general use of the term. As a cultural movement, it encompassed a resurgence of learning based on classical sources, the development of linear perspective in painting, and gradual but widespread educational reform. Traditionally, this intellectual transformation has resulted in the Renaissance being viewed as a bridge between the Middle Ages and the modern era. Although the Renaissance saw revolutions in many intellectual pursuits, as well as social and political upheaval, it perhaps is best known for its artistic developments and the contributions of such polymaths as Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo, who inspired the term Renaissance man.
Time for the weather! The weather brought to you by Kyle Neiman today consists of rain, snow, and tornadoes. 30 Years' War was one of the most destructive conflicts in European history.
Is it going?
The war was fought primarily in what is now Germany and at various points involved most of the countries of Europe. Naval warfare was also reached overseas and shaped the colonial formation of the future nations. The origins of the conflicts and goals of the participants were complex, and no single cause can accurately be described as the main reason for the fighting. Initially, the war was largely as a religious conflict between Protestants and Catholics in the Holy Roman Empire. Although disputes over the internal politics and balance of power with the empire played a significant role, gradually the war developed into a more general conflict involving most of the European powers. In this general phase, the war became more of a continuation of the Bourbon-Habsburg rivalry for European political prominence, and it turn led to future warfare between France and Habsburg powers, and less specifically about the religion. A major impact of the 30 Years' War was the extensive destruction of entire regions. Denuded by the foraging armies, episodes of famine and disease significantly decreased the population of the German states. Bohemia, the Low Countries, and Italy, while bankrupting most of the combatant powers, while the regiments were each not strictly mercenary and what they were not guns for that changed sides for the battle to battle. The individual soldiers that made up the regiments for the most part probably were. The problem of the discipline was made more difficult still by the ad hoc nature of the 17th century military financing. Armies were expecting to be largely self-funding from loot taken of tribute extorted from the settlements from where they operated. This encouraged a form of lawlessness that imposed often severe hardships of inhabitants of the occupied territory. Some of the quarrels that provoked the war went unresolved for a much longer time. The 30 Years' War was ended with the treaties of Eberstadt and Munster, part of the wider Peace of Westphalia.
The Qing dynasty, also known as the Manchu dynasty, was the last ruling dynasty of China, ruling from 1644 to 1912. It was preceded by the Ming dynasty and followed by the Republic of China. The dynasty was founded by the Manchu clan, Aisin Gyoro, in what is today northeast China. Starting in 1644, it expanded into China proper and its surrounding territories, establishing the Empire of the Great King. Complete pacification of China was accomplished around 1683 under the Kangxi Emperor. Originally established as the later Jin dynasty, to Qing meaning clear or pellucid in 1636. In 1644, Beijing was sacked by a coalition of rebel forces led by Li Zicheng, a minor Ming official turned leader of the peasant revolt. The last Ming emperor, Kongzhen, committed suicide when the city fell, marking the official end of the dynasty. The Manchus then allied with the Ming dynasty, General Wu Songhai, and seized control of Beijing and overthrew Li's short-lived Shang dynasty. Woo!
The Italian Wars, often referred to as the Great Italian Wars, or the Great Wars of Italy, and sometimes as the Habsburg Valois Wars, were a series of conflicts from 1494 to 1559 that involved, at various times, most of the city-states of Italy, the Papal States, most of the major states of Western Europe, France, Spain, and the Holy Roman Empire, England and Scotland, as well as the Ottoman Empire, originally arising from dynastic disputes over the Duchy of Milan and the Kingdom of Naples. The wars rapidly became a general struggle for power and territory among their various participants and were marked with an increasing degree of alliances. Yes, the counter-alliances, and indeed regular betrayals.